Good morning. Thank you for joining today's BCarm webinar on the importance of employee engagement and how health and safety can help build it. You're listening to Izzy, Marketing Manager at BCarm, and you'll shortly listen and hear from Steve Williams, Managing Director at BCarm, and also Kelly Tucker, our guest speaker from HR Star. So before I hand you over, just a few housekeeping rules. We'd love to involve you in the webinar, so we will be running some interactive polls during the session, which you can answer when they pop up on the screen. You'll also have the opportunity to ask any questions by filling in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll answer those at the end. So Steve, I'm going to hand it over to you to start. Thanks.
Hi, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us today, and thank you very much to Kelly for joining us as well, who's going to give us a really strong perspective on employee engagement from her perspective as the owner and managing director of HR Star, and we'll hear from more from Kelly in a moment. So what we're going to be covering this morning is we're going to be talking about what is employee engagement, why is it important, not just from a safety context, but from a broader business context. And then we're going to touch on how health and safety can actually contribute to employee engagement. So what is employee engagement? Well, here's a really long definition of employee engagement, but I think if you've ever worked in a business which has high employee engagement, it's a palpable thing. It's something that you can feel. Highly engaged teams, they're high performing, high levels of communication and collaboration amongst team members, great fun to be with, great fun to work with, the sort of teams that can walk through walls. And as a business owner, to have a highly engaged workforce really is an X factor, a turbocharging factor for your organization. But there's a huge raft of data out there. The biggest source of this data is a company called Gallup, which we'll be talking about today. But just to give you some headline statements, these are some of the business benefits that highly engaged workforces deliver to the organization. And this is comparing the top 25% of companies with the bottom 25% of companies. So I'm just going to leave that on screen for some of that to percolate through. So employee engagement is a real performance enhancer for any organization. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Kelly, who's going to take you through employee engagement from her perspective. Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you everyone for attending today, and thank you, Steve, for inviting me. So just in terms of a little bit about me, I'm just going to ask Steve to drive my slides for me. So I am Kelly Tucker. I own and run a HR consultancy called HR Star. I've worked in HR for 20 years now, fully CIPD qualified, worked in various roles in HR, starting as a HR administrator for a charity. And before HR Star, I was working as a HR business partner for a medical market research company. I created HR Star because I believed there was a different way to do HR. In previous roles, it's been quite a reactive role, sort of dealing with poor performance, high absence, high turnover. And I believed that there was a different way, that if you took a more proactive approach to your people, really aligned your people strategies to your business strategies, that you would have less of those performance issues, you'd have less turnover, less absence. And I really believe that HR had a place, on the board, and that everything that the business was trying to achieve needed to be threaded through the people and how you deal with your people. One of the most valuable assets a business can have is its people. So why wouldn't you put your sort of time and resource into developing a highly engaged team? So today I want to look at with you what is employee engagement, why is having an engaged workforce so important, and how do we create highly engaged people? So Steve's touched on obviously a definition already of employee engagement, One that we often refer to also is the one from Gallup, which describes employee engagement as the involvement, enthusiasm of employees in their workplace. So this is our first poll of today, and I just wanted to get a gauge of from the guys here today, do you feel involved and enthusiastic about your work? So if you could answer the poll for us now, just so we can get a bit of some stats from the participants, that would be great. So there should be a poll up on your screen if you could just complete that for me now. Other definitions that we, that are out there is the CIPD. That's something that us HR professionals use as a trusted resource. And they describe it as employees who have good quality jobs and are managed well will not only be happier, healthier and more fulfilled, but are also more likely to drive productivity, better products or services and innovation. And as I said, there's lots out there. And it's great to see it's 96% of the people here feel involved and enthusiastic about their work, which is fantastic, a fantastic statistic, but unfortunately not one that's kind of reflected in the wider business community. Okay, if we could just, next slide, please. Oh, and again, please, Steve, sorry. Yeah, so that's our Gallup definition, and that's one throughout this presentation I will be referring to Gallup quite a lot because, as I said, they are an organisation who really focus on the statistics research. They just spend a lot of time researching employee engagement, and it's a trusted resource in the industry. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, and again, sorry, Steve. Okay, so again, sort of just to enhance the what is employee engagement. So if money is the language of business, engagement is the language of motivation, and only through motivation does anything get done. To achieve organic customer growth, create remarkable experiences, and sort of persevere through challenging times, as we've seen over the last 12 months, organisations need more than just average or sufficient workers. They need exceptional performance. And I think, especially as at HR Star, we've seen over the last, couple of years that employee engagement has transitioned from a nice to have. In the past, I've heard lots of this say it's quite fluffy, it's a nice thing to do, into actually an essential sort of business metric and something that is really needs a place, on the agenda. So the prioritisation of engagement has moved up our organisation culture, and it does make a difference. And as Steve touched on, those businesses that are putting employee engagement at, putting it as an importance within their business are seeing the results from it. And, clients that we work with and have worked with now over the last 5 years are seeing those positive impacts of having an engaged team. Their businesses are more profitable, they have less staff absence, less performance issues, and their turnover is much lower. Okay, next slide, please, Steve. So one thing I just want to touch on, because quite often we hear terms around engagement, we hear employee experience, employee engagement, culture, and whilst they all impact on each other, there is a difference. So when we talk about culture, we talk about that's the way things are done, around your business. The behaviours of your employees, which are impacted by how engaged they are, and the values that your business holds will create your culture. So having a culture does begin with your purpose, identifying your why, your vision, your mission, and ensuring then that your people feel part of that. So culture is not the same as engagement, but they heavily influence each other. So just want to cover that off because quite often we do hear the different sort of culture, engagement, experience, etc. Okay, so in terms of, next slide please, Steve. Why engagement is important as well. Once an organisation reaches a certain size, people analytics become an important way to understand how that business is performing, its strengths, its weaknesses. And measuring aspects of employee engagement is an important part of this. The old adage stands true here: what gets measured gets attention. So we are, working with clients all the time at HR Star to ensure that not only are they taking the steps to build an engaged team, but they're making sure that that's measured as well. Employee engagement matters now more than ever. By developing a culture of employee engagement, leaders can forge strong, resilient organisations, teams, and individuals. And I think the last, going on for 12 months has really shown us the importance of having resilient organisations and having strong teams in place. I know from experience the clients that I work with, those who have highly engaged teams have fared much better during the last 10 months and the challenges that the pandemic has brought. So it's great to see that the majority of people here feel that they are involved and engaged with their work. But in terms of the organisations that you work for, and we've got another poll here, just want to know, does the organisation you work with measure employee engagement? There should be a poll that, yeah, great, thank you. So just give you a couple of seconds to complete that. Hopefully we'll get Oh, okay, so this is interesting. Yes, this is interesting. It's great that obviously the first stat was that the majority of us here feel that we're involved and encouraged and enthusiastic at work. But it's interesting that more than half of the people who are in an organisation that doesn't measure engagement, and that is something we see quite a lot of at HR Star. We start working with organisations and we'll say, are your teams engaged? Are they happy? And they're like, yeah, my team is really engaged, really happy. It's like, but how do you know if you're not measuring it? And also different aspects contribute to engagement. So how do you know which ones are strong, which are present, which aren't? So also measuring, being able to see that you are improving is really key as well to building those engaged teams. I just wanted to share some stats on the next couple of slides as well. Again, because I think in the past we've seen some business leaders feel it's a nice to have, it's a fluffy thing, but employee engagement really does matter. If you just see some of those slides there, 75% of workers who've experienced poor management have considered leaving their job. And studies find that highly engaged employees are 87% less likely to leave their company. So this stuff really does make a difference to business. I'm sure we've all worked in organisations and understand the time and resource that goes into managing poor performance, having to deal with high absence, the impact that has on the team, when people are leaving, the time and resource that goes into recruiting, training, onboarding new employees. So it makes really good business sense to have a highly engaged team for all of those reasons. So why are so many employees not engaged at work? We usually look at a lack of engagement is a result of feeling undervalued by management. And we will come on to this in a sec, but management plays a key role in driving engagement in business. Low pay and lack of rewards, poor company communication. Again, that's something we see a lot of at HR Star when we go start working with new clients, that the feedback is, I just don't feel that I'm communicated to, I don't know what's going on. And we know that a massive driver of engagement is feeling that that your role has purpose, that you're part of something bigger. Mismatch with values, goals and company mission. And again, we see that a lot. People have defined mission statements, they have values, they're displayed maybe on a wall somewhere, but then what are you doing to actually live those values? How are you ensuring that you're recruiting against those values, you're managing people against those values, that you're rewarding against those values? That's how you really bring them to life, and that's how you build that culture of like high performing, highly engaged employees. And next slide, please, Steve. And then just a couple more there. 41% of workers in the UK feel aligned to their organisation goals. So just on the bit that I've just touched on. An engaged workforce really does fuel better business results. It can increase profits and company success. And Gallup, talks about this a lot, and their studies show that, companies with high levels of engagement related to positive business outcomes, and 22% more profitable than those with low level of engagement. And I think, we live in a world now where there's so much visibility. So prior to accepting your role, 46% of people consider the benefit package on offer, that's more than salary. It's like, how are we rewarding and recognising value that people are bringing to our organisation? And, whilst there is a massive pool of unemployed people now due to the pandemic, clients that I'm working with, trying to bring new people into their business, it is becoming harder because people who are still in their roles are very reluctant to move at the moment. So if you're looking to bring in, really high quality people into your business, you have to be able to offer them, a great employee experience. You have to be transparent in how that you're going to do that, and so that they feel that when they're taking that step, they're joining this, high performing culture where they will feel rewarded and part of something bigger. Okay, next slide, please, Steve. Obviously, health and safety, has an impact too. So employees in workplaces with high levels of engagement are safer too. They see less accidents if they've got a highly involved team, and business units among the top 25% of engaged workforce saw this slide is 70%, but the latest data is actually 64% fewer incidents than those in the bottom 25%. And another positive consequence of engagement in the workplace is employee well-being. When staff are happy and engaged at work, their overall mental and physical health is positively affected, and people with good health perform better. Gallup found that 62% of engaged employees feel their work positively affects their physical health, while 78% of engaged workers feel their work life benefit them psychologically. And I think, we're all aware that mental health has, really risen in terms of people being more open about that, talking about that more, and we have to take that on board. We have to be aware, especially in the current situation of employee burnout, of overwhelm, and making sure that we are checking in and just making sure that our staff are okay. Okay, so how do we create highly engaged teams? So we need to measure what matters most for employees. It's really interesting that the stats just from this webinar today show that, the majority of organisations are not measuring it. So, and often when we do measure it, what do we need to measure? We can use employee engagement surveys. They're a great tool to have, as long as obviously the results are then followed up on. We can hold one-to-one meetings, and that's something we really encourage with our clients, to have regular one-to-one meetings to build this open and honest, trusting relationship between line manager and their teams. Hold small group discussions about it, conduct exit interviews. When somebody's leaving the organisation, you still want them to have a positive experience as they leave. They're going out as a brand ambassador for your company. You want them to say, yeah, when I worked there, it was great. And conduct stay interviews. That's something we do quite a lot with our clients. We sit down, we talk to individuals about, how they're feeling about certain elements of their role, of their development, etc. And that's a really good way of gauging engagement as well. One thing that Gallup focused on, and this is their thing that they do a lot of, is their 12 elements of the employee engagement. So if we just jump to the next slide, please. Thank you, Steve. These are the areas that Gallup say needs to be focused on and measured to ensure that we have a highly engaged team. So people knowing what's expected of them at work, that being clear on the expectations, that in terms of job role, behaviours, attitudes, etc. Having the materials and equipment to do their work. I think we've seen lots of businesses move to remote working, and whilst we thought that was going to be a temporary thing at first, it was probably just like set them up with a couple of things, they'll be okay. But as we look to move to a more remote world of working, do they have all the tools and equipment they need to ensure that they can continue doing their role and feel engaged with the rest of the organisation? Having the opportunity to do what they do best every day, like I say, receiving recognition, having somebody who cares about them at work or actually asks if they're okay, and that massively impacts on the well-being side of things and people feeling being part of something bigger. Obviously having their opinions, being able to share feedback. So these are the 12 areas that Gallup focus on, and they are really key areas. And we actually use a different survey platform at HR Star, but it's very similar in terms of the way that we measure engagement. Okay, next slide, please. So also in terms of creating highly engaged teams, managers, I cannot emphasize enough the role that managers play in creating highly engaged teams. It's not just a HR thing. Yes, HR often drives it and sort of oversees it, but managers account for 70% of the variance in team engagement. So managers and leaders should know their people, who they are, not just what they do, but their jobs. Every interaction with an employee has the potential to influence his or her engagement within the business. Leaders need to manage their employees, find ways to continually check in, have those conversations. Leaders in the best companies strategically align their employment engagement efforts. They find ways to communicate engagement throughout the year, share best practice, and use every opportunity, touch point, and communication channel to reinforce and recognise the organisation's commitment to employee engagement. They integrate employee engagement fully into the business. So I've just got another poll now, just touch on my last two slides. So I'm just interested to know, in terms of the people here, do you feel that your manager or someone at work seems to care about you as a person? So again, I'll just give you a couple of seconds to complete that. Okay, I'll share the results in a sec. Okay. Yes, fantastic. So 100% of you. So that's fantastic because, again, like we said, that's not always the case in all organisations out there, but it's great to see that everyone here does feel that someone at work, either their manager or someone else, cares about them as a person. I think now more than ever, that's so important. So that's really encouraging to see. Thank you. And then in terms of another way that we obviously ensure that we're creating a highly engaged team is to make it an ongoing process. Engagement is not just an annual survey or a checklist of tactical action items. We need to fully integrate the concepts behind each item into casual conversations, meeting agendas, performance evaluations, team goal setting. Something that we encourage our clients to do is obviously use surveys, but pulse surveys, but also, like I say, just make that ongoing. Like, employee engagement will never be done. It's not a tick. And if you've got a highly engaged team, that's fantastic. But lots of things will affect engagement levels, obviously, like we've seen over the last couple of years. Individuals, what may be happening for them personally, the type of work they're working on, if they don't receive recognition for a certain project or task, or if their appraisal gets missed that year. So it's really important to keep it as an ongoing, make it part of your workplace DNA. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of HRStar's approach to employee engagement, as I say, we really focus on you and your people to drive business excellence. We work really closely with business leaders. We believe we're experts in people. We're continually researching. We're continually working on employee engagement with clients, etc. We become a trusted partner with our clients. We like to become an extension of their business. We immerse ourselves in their business, and we believe we're future-proofing businesses. As you know, I think the information I've shared today really shows employee engagement is really important to business success, and by taking, you know, a proactive approach to this, you will really stand yourself in a really positive position for the future. So we focus on these 5 key areas when we're working with our clients. So people strategy looks at workforce planning. Do you have the right structures in place to support your business plans and your business goals? Do your people strategies align to your business strategies? Do you have a succession plan in place? Have you got a you know, are you like developing talent from within? And do you have, you know, the structure? Do you know what structure you're going to need when you grow, and how are you going to get there? So we work with our clients on that side of things, but also on job design. So as we've touched on earlier, having roles defined, being clear on expectations is a key driver of engagement. So we work on job design with our clients as well. There's obviously the workplace and well-being, so that's where we look at people management, employee voice, making sure that we are continually checking in, getting feedback, and we're then acting on that feedback, but also on the well-being side. When we talk about well-being, and that's sort of physical well-being, emotional, financial, so we've got lots of programs that we can put in place to cover that off. Learning development, so we have an L&D specialist as part of the HRStar team who creates and delivers bespoke learning and development, sort of mainly around management training or leadership coaching. So that's our approach to L&D. The vision, mission and values, that's where we're working with organisations to ensure they have a clearly defined mission, and we're then making sure that is threaded through everything that they do. And reward and recognition, as you know, we've touched on, people feeling that they're recognised and rewarded for the value that they add, and how you can put structures in place and link that to your values is another key area of the work that we're doing. So that's a bit of an overview of employee engagement from me. I am so passionate about employee engagement. I'm sure that's come across, and I love talking about it. Could talk for ages, but I won't. I'm really happy for anyone to get in touch. You obviously can ask questions now, but outside of this, if they want to have a chat with me about, you know, how we go about creating highly engaged teams at HRStar, or if they just want to find out a little bit more about employee engagement and the positive impacts it can have on their business, then please do get in touch. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. Really, really great. Thank you very much. And I think one of the things that kind of resonates with me about Kelly's piece is that, you know, employee engagement, it's an HR thing, and no, it's not. Every aspect of the business contributes to employee engagement. And just to pick up on why it's important now. So this data is a couple of months old, but this is a variety of data that was being produced by a number of different organisations, which relate to how employees feel about going back into the workplace as they return to work. And I'm not going to read this out for you; you can see them there. But not everyone is happy about the idea of going back to work. We have to remember that, you know, safety and well-being is actually a basic human need. So for those of you who know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these are our basic physiological needs that have to be fulfilled. So if we're not addressing these issues, then it has a fundamental impact on the way people feel about life and the way that they work. So just picking up on the Gallup Q12, and I first came across Gallup Q12 3 years ago, and again, the thing that hit me about this is, yes, I get all of this. For me, employee engagement has always been an important part of the working environments that I've been responsible for. But with a kind of health and safety risk management bias, there were three things for me that came to the fore. So these 12 questions kind of form a hierarchy which deals with basic needs at the bottom: individual motivation, and teamwork, and then growth. And when we look at these questions, for me, it was questions 1 and 2. I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right. I know what's expected of me at work. And question 5, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me, had a direct correlation to safety in the workplace, which I'm just going to expand upon now. So again, if we think about, you know, I know what is expected of me, then key to that is not only just is it this is your job, this is your job description, but this is how you need to do the work. So when we talk about more hazardous manual working environments, then training how to do the job and to do the job safely are really important. You know, an organization says, you know, you do the job like this, you get the product out the door, as opposed to an organization, you do the job like this, but you must do this, you must do that, because otherwise you're going to injure yourselves. That's a different kind of approach. One is going to build that sense of safety into the employee knowing what's expected of me. One isn't. And another important factor about this, which I think directly links to safety, which, you know, safety is an ongoing process. It's not something you do once, you have to reiterate it time and time again. And that is the rule of 7. So if you've not come across the rule of 7, basically, we need to hear something 7 times to retain that information. So it's all very well telling an employee, this is what's expected of you, but if it's not being reinforced on an ongoing basis, it doesn't go in. So it doesn't become part of their thinking. The second area is that if I have the equipment and materials to do my job right, I guess, you know, there's some very basic, simple things that relate to safety here. So certainly one of those is going to be the implementation of the control measures defined by the risk assessment to make sure that the employee does have the safety arrangements that they need, that the company says that they should have in place to do their job correctly. And if we look at a more specific level, when it comes to PPE, that we're providing them with equipment and we're checking and maintaining it on a regular basis to ensure their safety and well-being. You know, in the context of safety, of course, PPE is the last thing that you do. It's the last line of defense. So it is at the most acute end of delivering safety to workforce. And if we then think about, you know, COVID itself, you know, one organization that we've worked with for many years, they're going through a cultural change as an organization. They have been very much a production, get it out the door at all costs, if you like, profits over people in the past, and they're moving away from that. Well, I was talking to one of their safety representatives, and I said, "How's it going in terms of COVID, and how are the workforce responding? Because their employees have struggled sometimes to engage in safety." And he said that it was actually really noticeable, the difference. The more that the company was doing around the COVID controls, the more positively their workforce was responding from a safety perspective, something that they hadn't really seen before. Perhaps there's no surprise there, but in their context, they were doing something very demonstrable that fed into that need for safety and that need to have the right equipment and materials to do the job. And we should also remember that equipment and materials can also mean training. I have the right knowledge and expertise to do the job that's required of me. And again, I've seen many organisations where they've struggled to gain engagement at a supervisory level within that organisation because they haven't equipped the supervisors with sufficient knowledge to discharge the duties that they've been given. The supervisor feels they're taking on legal responsibility, but hasn't been given all the tools to do the job. And the final point, my supervisor or someone at work cares about me as a person, perhaps a little bit more tangential, but employee assistance programs, employee assistance programs aren't just an HR thing. That's a well-being, workplace safety, workplace well-being, occupational health. So that again, that links to health and safety. The proactive and visible safety monitoring within the organisation again demonstrates that, particularly if we're monitoring protective equipment that an employee has at an individual level, or their workplace equipment at home, that's visibly demonstrating a concern about the individual and the individual's well-being. And if you use an e-learning platform like the one that we provide at BCarm, we actually have a mechanism within that actually allows us to capture potential risk issues for that employee and for the employee to leave comments about that, so the business can in fact respond to those, demonstrating, again, as Kelly made, it's all very well doing surveys, it's all very well asking information, but it's doing something with that information so that the employees actually feel that there is a genuine care. It's not the organisation just going through the steps. And another area, again, where the business can demonstrate care for the individual is by actually using the performance metrics it might generate around its safety, so that it's able to communicate its safety performance to the wider business. Effectively, this is what we're doing to keep you safe. So again, going back to that rule of 7 and many of the points that Kelly made, this is an ongoing iterative process. These things can directly feed into employee engagement, because safety sits at the bottom of that Q12 hierarchy. And there are perhaps some other areas as well where health and safety can have a bearing. So, at work, my opinion seems to count. Well, consultation is an important part of the safety process. So if the safety representatives, if the management are engaging the whole workforce on safety matters, that can feed into that sense of, my work at work, my opinion seems to count. And equally, when everyone's pulling in the same direction and everyone's doing the same thing, then that feeds into number 9, which is my co-workers committed to doing quality work. So safety not just about ticking the boxes. This is about it actually having kind of wider business impacts than just 0 accidents, but actually contributing to the wider sense of the business being engaged in the well-being of the employees, which then works the other way around. So picking up on Kelly's numbers, how does employee engagement contribute to health and safety? Because this is a virtuous circle. Then, as the most current data shows, the businesses in that top quartile, top 25% of engaged workforces, see a 64% fewer accidents than those in the bottom. Now, in heavier industries, that is going to make a significant difference in terms of workplace disruption caused by accidents, but also the impact on culture and performance as well. So I'd like to kind of, again, leave you with the statistics we started off. So in case they didn't, if they passed too quickly on the screen before you could see them, if I can do anything in my organization that will give me these performance levers, then I'm going to think about it. And actually looking outside of the box and thinking about things like safety can actually contribute to the overall business performance. So thank you very much for your time today. We've hopefully given you a kind of a different perspective on safety and how that works within the overall business performance. So just like to throw that open now. So Kelly, if you'd like to come back on, and Liz, if you'd like to come back on, Just like to throw that open to any questions. So, Izzy, have we had any questions at all submitted?
Yeah, so thanks. We're back onto the Q&A panel now. So again, if you've got any questions, you can ask those by using the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We have had a couple through already. So I'm just going to start off by asking those. I think this one's for Kelly. How do we measure employee engagement?
Okay, so as sort of touched on in my slides, it is about sort of choosing what you want to measure. And I think obviously the Gallup Q12 are really good areas. We use a platform at HR Star, it's called Culture Amp. It's very similar, so you can do different surveys, etc. But a good starting point is actually to talk to people. We do what we call our People Insights project as a bit of a starting point when we start working with new clients who are looking to increase their engagement levels. And that's where we go in and we'll talk to every individual within the organisation and really find out, how they're feeling about their role, the communication within the organisation, the learning and development they may be experiencing, whether they feel part of something bigger. So I think it's a combination of maybe using some surveys, but also talking to people as well, gathering the information first so you can have a look at, how you're faring to start with. And then from that, like identifying the areas that you really want to measure or focus on. And again, it's very important that if you're doing surveys or asking for feedback, that you're then actually doing something with those results. So we quite sort of favour the you said, so we're going to do, and then providing updates like on that to employees as well to encourage that participation in that ongoing dialogue around it.
Thanks, Kelly. Where do we start with improving employee engagement? Another question.
Okay, so I think again it's really good to find out how you're faring as an organisation, but something that is, like we see as a massive driver of engagement is people feeling they're part of the organisation's purpose. So we quite often will start with that with our clients. So we'll sit down and we'll really look at their mission and vision if they have one. If they don't, we'll look to find that with them. We'll include people within the organisation with that through focus groups, etc. And then we'll also have our values that we'll either, if they've already have them, that we'll review or we'll help create. And then it's about threading them through everything that you do. So looking at your recruitment process, how are we ensuring that when we recruit that we're bringing people in line with those values, how are we measuring performance against our values, how are we rewarding. So that's when we'll then start working around the sort of projects that I highlighted on the engagement star. But you can start at any point of it. I suppose it depends on sort of the size of your organisation, what where you're at the moment with it. So yeah, I mean, again, it's something that I'd be happy to have conversation with outside of this.
Another question is, how can I engage my remote team?
Yeah, I think that's something that's obviously been, quite relevant over the recent months. So I would say, in a similar way that you do if you have a team in the workplace, but communication is going to be so much more important because of obviously that remoteness. So a lot of the people that we're working with, we do this at HR Star as well. So we'll do a huddle type meeting in the morning, like over Zoom, and then we will, we use Slack, email, WhatsApp groups throughout the day to keep in contact. But I think it's still important to do the same things, like run some surveys, hold regular one-to-ones, check in with your teams, but also do the non-work things as well. So maybe do some social events. I know a lot of us like get zoomed out, but in terms of maybe sort of some non-work check-ins, like obviously focusing on the well-being side as well. So everything that you would do if you still had your team in an office, but just something that increase on communication, I would say.
Thanks.
I think
Steve, yeah, go ahead.
I think you can probably add to that as well. Obviously, with so many people working from home now, the safety element of that is actually just making sure that they've got what they need to do the job properly at home. Right? You don't want people working off a laptop sitting on their sofa all day long. That is not productive, and actually it's not safe. So it goes an awful long way to with the business actually saying, right, you need this equipment, it's being sent to you, you have a proper working environment. So.
Okay, Steve, one for you. What can we do if the workforce doesn't want to engage in health and safety?
Okay, that's an interesting one, and I think perhaps that might be the most important thing there will be to try and work out why, and it's probably because the overall levels of employee engagement are quite low. So typically when we see a disengaged workforce, it's generally because there is a lack of alignment between the workforce and the business. As I mentioned earlier, the organisation that I was talking to recently, they may, their culture is changing, but historically, they probably have put profits ahead of people, and that takes a long time to change. So I think it's all very good beating employees over the head for not doing health and safety, and there is an element of people have to do what they're told in the workplace, but if you want, that's a sticking plaster. If you want to address it, for me, employee engagement is the area to start, and that probably then starts with leadership in the organisation as well. So,
okay, a question for the panel. Given the data we see on COVID-19 health and safety provisions, does the panel have a view on young people who maybe have a different perspective on risk?
I'm happy to express a view here. So yes, young people do have a very, very different perspective on risk. That's just part of the way the human brain develops. And I think it's probably about the age of 25 that risk perception actually begins to change. When we don't actually develop our adult mind until we're in our mid to late 20s. I think the only way that you can address this is by taking the time to actually talk to them. And frequently when people look at risk and people's behavior around risk, maybe it's not what we expect. You have to remember that risk is made up of two things. So when we look at risk, we look at likelihood and we look at consequence. Now men and women look at risk differently. So men tend to look at risk by looking at likelihood first, consequence second. Women the other way around, so which gives rise to conversations about yes, but it will never happen. So sometimes what you've got to do in those circumstances is you've got to focus on the consequences, and not just the consequences on the individual, but the wider consequences as well. So that a mind that might have a, let's be fair, when we were all young, we all thought we knew everything. It's helping people understand the wider consequences. You can't change the risk bias in a young person's head. You can, however, give them more information, and that should be focused around consequence, because they'll argue likelihood until the cows come home. Sorry, Kelly, I don't know whether you'd add anything to that.
I just totally agree with you. I think I was going to say it's about sort of communication and education, isn't it? Sort of speaking and having those open conversations to obviously explain the risk, like you say, the consequence. I totally agree. Yeah, Steve. Yeah.
But even then, for me, it then comes back to the rule of 7. It's no good doing these things just once.
Yeah.
These things, saying something once, talk is cheap. But saying something 7 times and backing it up in your day-to-day actions, that's what drives intent and behaviour. So rule of 7 every time. So don't just do it once. Keep doing it. Keep repeating it.
And I think as well, with a lot of the things we've talked about today, it's about that leadership team leading by example, isn't it? Taking the lead on that, really displaying the values and the behaviours that you want to see within an organisation. Like you say, continually communicating around that, reinforcing the message through actions and words.
Great.
Just to touch on that, one of our clients is when they're a large leisure facility. I won't mention who they are. But one of the things that they did at the very outset around COVID was, again, they use the BCarm system, so they have a lot of data around how they are performing in terms of their safety measures. So they actually decided this had to be their customer experience is absolutely critical to them. So they decided to actually get their marketing team, the internal communications team, to engage in a communications program around what they were doing on COVID to protect their employees. Literally on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, they were feeding information out there so that people were constantly receiving this information and reinforcing what was being done.
Great, thank you, Steve. Lots of useful information and insights there. We are at the end now, and so we'd just like to take a couple of seconds just to say thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you found it useful. So as mentioned before, we will be sharing the recording, which includes the sources. I know that was another question that was asked, of the statistics that we used within the presentation slides. So hopefully I'll get that out to you this week. And if you follow us on BCarm, if you follow BCarm, sorry, on LinkedIn, then you can find out about the next events that we'll be running in 2021, and also the insights that we share quite regularly on employee engagement and health and safety. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.